certainly hope this little incident hasn't put you off flying, miss. Statistically speaking, of course, it's still the safest way to travel.
Let's go. But inconspicuously. Through the window.
And here we go.
What is up, everyone? Welcome to DC Standom, your guided tour of the DC multiverse. I'm your host, Mike Cecchini, the editor-in-chief of denofgeek.com, and each week, I'm bringing you discussions with writers, artists, actors, and experts, covering everything from DC Comics to the movies and TV that make up the DCU. There's a lot of cool stuff on the horizon in the next few weeks and months, and we'll talk a little bit about each of them today. Coming up, we've got a little preview of Superman and Lois Season 3, the early reactions to Shazam Fury of the Gods, including, especially my own, and my biggest pet theory about the Flash movie. Before we get to all of that, I'd like to tell you that this episode of DC Standom is presented by DC's Justice League Cosmic Chaos. Outright Games and Warner Brothers are calling DC fans of all ages to unite against chaos in the all-new open-world action-adventure game, DC's Justice League Cosmic Chaos. Designed to be fun for the whole family, you can play as Batman, Superman, or Wonder Woman to battle the mischievous Mr. Mxyzptlk, who has summoned Starro the Conqueror and other supervillains to keep the Justice League busy while he becomes the new self-appointed mayor of Happy Harbor. There's more DC heroes in this one, too. Players can also interact with other Justice League members like Green Lantern, Cyborg, The Flash, and Aquaman, who make cameos throughout the game. You can enjoy DC's Justice League Cosmic Chaos with friends and family in two-player instant action couch co-op to engage with the exciting and hilarious gameplay. Justice League Cosmic Chaos is available to play now on PlayStation 4, PlayStation 5, Nintendo Switch, Xbox One, Xbox XS, and Steam. For more information, head to OutrightGames.com and follow Outright Games on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok for all the latest updates and information on Justice League Cosmic Chaos. So let's talk a little bit about the new season of Superman and Lois, which premieres on March 14th. It's no secret that I love this show, and really, despite the differences from the comics, notably the fact that Lois and Clark only have one biological child there, not the twins of the TV series, it's consistently amazing to me just how much this show feels like it's perfectly aligned with the current era of the character in the comics. It's a weird thing, too, because that isn't always the case with Superman live-action adaptations, which are sometimes a little out of step with their moment. The movie serial of 1948 was the first live-action Superman, and it's more or less aligned with what fans would have found if they picked up an issue of Action Comics or Superman at the time. But the Adventures of Superman TV series, which followed a few years later in the early 1950s, felt far more like the stripped-down, social justice, crime-focused Superman comics of the late 1930s and early 1940s. George Reeves' Superman has far more in common with the character as he appeared in those earliest stories and in the early radio shows than he does with the extremely science fiction, kind of bonkers Superman comics of the 1950s. Even the Christopher Reeve Superman movies, especially the first two, are of a slightly different feel from the comics of the late 70s and early 80s, and they ended up influencing the character's 1986 comics reboot rather than taking their cues from the character as he was currently appearing in the comics of the time. Funny enough, it was the Superboy TV series of the late 80s that felt a lot more like the comics of the 70s and early 80s, but that's a story for another time. You really have to look at 1993's Lois and Clark, The New Adventures of Superman TV show, to find the next live-action adaptation that was directly taking its cues from the comics of its era. I know, this show isn't for everyone, but the first season especially is really great, and you should definitely check it out. Hell, even Man of Steel felt like it was taking even more inspiration from the John Byrne comics of the mid-1980s than anything that was going on in the comics of 2013 when that movie came out. But Superman and Lois is something else. Yes, it isn't really a faithful adaptation of the Superman comic since John Kent was introduced, but spiritually it sure is. And they absolutely nail the family dynamic between Clark, Lois, Jordan, and Jonathan, while simultaneously paying homage to practically every era of the character. There's always deep cut references in this show, and it's very clear that the showrunners and the writers' room really know and love their Superman lore. Anyway, all of this is to say that the first two episodes of Superman and Lois season 3 continue with all of this. But the reason I bring up the comics parallels in particular is because if you've been reading recent issues of Action Comics, you know just how overtly horny Lois and Clark have been for each other lately. The season premiere of Superman and Lois is very much in keeping with this vibe, and it's kind of refreshing to see, especially in contrast to how sexless something like the MCU always is. I can't really say much else about these first two episodes because of spoilers, but I will say that these are somewhat low key, but they're heavy on the dramatic elements. Don't worry though, each one features some terrific action as well. And honestly, Tyler Hoechlin has never looked better in the Superman suit. And yes, for the curious, Michael Bishop is really solid as the new Jonathan Kent. I feel like it might take a little while to get those real brotherly vibes that we got from Jordan Elsis and Alex Garfin in the first two seasons, but these things take time, and I think Michael is off to a great start as John. Come back in 2 weeks because I will have my interview with co-showrunners Todd Helbing and Brent Fletcher to dive into some spoilers about the new season of Superman and Lois. Okay, so I've seen Shazam, Fury of the Gods, and I've got good news for everyone. It's really good. The Shazam corner of the DC universe is something that's really important to me. I grew up loving Shazam comics almost as much as Superman stuff. My dad grew up in the 1940s, and he was a massive fan of the original comics. That was his favorite hero. So I was kind of a weird kid, surprise to nobody, who loved the character who barely appeared in other media when I was growing up, and who I mostly had to read about in reprints of comics that were made before I was born. And I loved the first Shazam movie. I thought it really balanced all of the elements that I liked from the classic stories while introducing the newer ones, like Billy's entire foster extended family getting powers. You know, I wasn't a big fan of the extended Shazamily in the comics when they were first introduced, but that movie won me over. And that scene in the first film where they all emerge as heroes, it really moved me. So that's why I'm pleased to report that Shazam, Fury of the Gods is also really good. Everything that worked in the first movie is present here, including the way that director David F. Sandberg manages to get all of those 1980s throwback horror moments into a family movie about magical superheroes. The kids in the family play a larger role in this one than the first one, and they're all really great. The movie is be a little bit overstuffed in ways that the first one wasn't, but this is still a solid superhero movie to get you through the last days of winter. And yes, I know there's all this talk about does it matter with the new DCU coming? Who cares? Just enjoy the movie. That being said, director David F. Sandberg pointed out to me in an interview that there's nothing in this movie that would prevent these characters from coming back in the new DCU, and it's true. Come back next week for my spoiler-filled interview with David F. Sandberg for more on Shazam, Fury of the Gods.
My name is Kara.
I'm
Well, we're Barry.
Folks, I have a theory about the Flash movie villain, and I know I'm not alone on this one. But before I get into it, I have a disclaimer. I have not seen this movie. I know there's a lot of talk out there about advanced screenings, but I have not attended one. And if I had, I wouldn't even be talking about my own theories because it's just not right, right? I also haven't read any of the alleged spoilers and plot leaks out there. My knowledge of this film is only what's been revealed through official channels, so what follows is only a theory. Now, throughout that trailer for The Flash that dropped last month, we see that there are two Barry Allens running around. One presumably is younger and from an alternate Flashpoint timeline that, our Barry probably created when he tried to prevent the murder of his mother. But the villain of the Flash movie, it's almost certainly going to turn out to be Eobard Thawne, the Reverse Flash. He's generally become Flash's most notable and, frankly, somewhat overused foe in media in recent years. And he's the villain of the Flashpoint comic book story that this movie is drawing some inspiration from. And yes, we know that there seems to be some kind of Black Flash in the footage. And of course, General Zod is in this flick, but I'm still betting that they're holding something back here. So what does that have to do with the second Barry we see? Well, the thing to know about the Reverse Flash is he's from the future, the 25th century to be exact, and he was a massive Barry Allen and Flash fanboy. So much so that before he got his speed powers, he took his obsession to such heights that he got plastic surgery to look more like his hero. He eventually traveled back in time to meet Barry, maybe hoping for a team up or something, but as you might expect, he wasn't the most stable guy to begin with, and it didn't really go well. My money is on the second Barry being Thawne in disguise, having traveled back in time to befriend, trap, I don't know, maybe team up with the Flash, but probably to kill him and take his place as the one true speedster hero. For one thing, he's wearing yellow in his civilian clothes, which is not exactly incriminating on its own, but come on, this is a Flash movie. But there was one detail that was only visible in the DC Fandom footage that was released in 2021 and has since been scrubbed from the internet. The number on that cab that the Barrys took to Wayne Manor, the last two digits on it are 63. The Reverse Flash first appeared in the pages of DC Comics in, you guessed it, 1963. Is this enough to really implicate that the second Barry is Eobard Thawne in disguise? Well, not necessarily, but considering how DC has utilized Reverse Flash essentially as Flash's equivalent of Joker or Lex Luthor in recent years, I can't imagine a world where he isn't in this movie in some form. What are your thoughts? Let us know. And that's it for this week's DC Standom. By the way, folks, I do have a little confession to make. This episode was supposed to feature a very cool guest talking about a recently completed and extremely cool DC Comics project. We even did the interview. The interview was great. It was funny. It was super informative. And something went wrong and the recording was lost because I'm an idiot. I was hoping to reschedule that one for a later date. And hopefully that'll still happen. But in the meantime, make sure you tune into the next two episodes because I've got Shazam, Fury of the Gods director David F. Sandberg coming up, and Superman and Lois showrunners Todd Helbing and Brent Fletcher. They'll be giving us some terrific, spoiler-filled interviews about those projects. Don't forget to check out our web home at denofgeek.com, where you can find all our DC coverage at denofgeek.com/DC. Make sure you are following at DC Standom on Twitter and Instagram. Give those a follow. Tell us what you want to hear about in upcoming episodes. Thanks again to our sponsor, Outright Games and Justice League Cosmic Chaos. Head over to outrightgames.com for more info on this fun new game. And hey, did you know that we also have a Marvel show? That's right. You can also listen to Marvel Standom wherever you're listening to this show right now. Check it out. Sometimes we do our Standoms live. Well, most of the time if we're talking about Marvel Standom. So make sure you're following Den of Geek on Twitch. That's twitch.tv/DenofGeekTV. And on YouTube, youtube.com/DenofGeekUS. This has been DC Standom on the Den of Geek Network. Until next time, remember, folks, we stand together.